Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. This has been one of those big dreams that I had to talk to you, because when you and I first met, oh my gosh, we spoke for, I think it was 2 hours at the end of the day. We just couldn't stop talking, which is why I was so excited to have you here. Before we move further, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, thank you, Henriette. I totally echo your feelings. It was one of those rare kind of conversations that you just can't believe is happening at the time. We should have just recorded that, right? But yeah, my name is Dr. Bonnie Wims. I'm a counseling psychologist. I was trained and credentialed in London, actually. I used to live in London. I now live in Manhattan, in New York City. And I became a psychologist later in life. It was a second career for me, although it was always my dream. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And I now practice online exclusively. So kind of stumbled into a good COVID model. I've been working online with clients since 2012. So I'm very comfortable with it and I love it. And it gives me an opportunity to work with people all over the world.
So tell me a little bit about this journey. Tell me about how you got started and how you said that you kind of just fell in love with it. You fell into it as well. How did that look like for you, and how did that kind of develop to where you are now?
Yeah, so I think I always wanted to be a psychologist. I knew that. I didn't really know what that meant back in the early childhood days, but I was drawn to stories. I was drawn to people writing books that was examining sort of the mind and what made people tick. And I think that was always my curiosity from a very young age and into high school. And then I couldn't go to college right out of high school. It just wasn't in the good situation for me to be able to do that. So knowing that that was what was required, I sort of went off on a whole different career tangent to pay the bills, pay the rent. You end up having, a family, husband, 2 boys, and that goal seemed to get pushed down the road even further. But finally, I was able to quit the other job and go back to school. And then we moved to London and I got my doctorate in London, which was hugely intimidating to me because like most Americans, we're infatuated with the accent and we think everyone is so much smarter than we are because of their beautiful accent. So I was intimidated to think that I could get my degree in the UK, but I did. And honestly, I have a hard time saying this, but I can honestly say it's the most proud I was of myself. It's the age in my 40s to go back to school and get my doctorate. It was the hardest and the most fulfilling and satisfying thing that I ever did. So, and then you build your private practice. I built a practice there in London, and then we moved back to the States. So I've kind of reinvented myself a few times throughout the journey, but always with the psychology and the passion for helping people understand their mental health better. It's always been my goal.
Yeah. I love your story, and I think this kind of segues brilliantly into what we want to talk about here, because you said, in your 40s, you went back to school and you went and you worked hard and you got your doctorate. And this kind of leads very nicely into the first kind of thing we want to talk about, which is it's never too late. And you got to that point where you're like, I could just stagnate and just stay where I am and just still keep dreaming about becoming a psychologist. But you decided that it's never too late. Even at this age, I'm still going to go back to school and I'm going to get my doctorate. But I think for so many other people, when it comes to that, they almost feel like, this is just the way things are. I'm going to deal with it. I don't want change. But from your point of view, what would you like to say to those people?
Yeah, I think, and I'm not exempt from that thought. It took a lot for me to step into that. It wasn't something I did lightly. It wasn't like, oh, I'm sure it'll all work out fine. I mean, I spent 5+ years pretty much terrified all the time that I wasn't going to finish, that I wasn't going to do it correctly, that I wasn't going to be able to pass in the end, that I wasn't going to be able to write the thesis. It's one of those things where the fear was always there, but it was, what do you do with the fear instead of letting kind of the fear manage you? So in the thinking about it never being too late. I think, you know, I work with people all the time, and I think you do too, where it's this idea that the habitual way that we have of being have been in part built from, you know, our very young experiences all the way up to who we are today. And that habitual way of being can feel as if that's a permanent sort of hardwired part of us. And what's being proven over and over in studies now is that it's that's not true, and that things aren't hardwired. And just because it's a habit doesn't mean it's hardwired in the way that you are. So lots of flexibility and elasticity in our ways in which we deal with life. And the more we understand about ourselves, the more we're then able to change maybe unhelpful ways that we have of seeing things. So I always tell people it's never too late. It's never too late to get that doctorate. It's never too late to go to therapy. It's never too late to challenge parts of you that you don't find that are the most helpful way. And just saying that's the way I am, it just doesn't, it's not proven out in research now. We really aren't anyway. We can morph and change with deliberate work all the time. And people do it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the hardest thing for people to kind of grasp is the concept of changing a habit. Because you've, like you just mentioned, you know, you do things from such a young age, and it's a pattern that you're creating, that habit, and then trying to break that habit, knowing, okay, if I can change, where do I start? Well, normally starts with a habit, with the thinking behind it. But that, I think, is the hardest thing for people to change, is that habit as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because the habits, even if they are unhelpful, you know them, they're comfortable. I always tell people it's like that we all probably have, or maybe it's just me, that outfit that you like to wear around the house that's, you know, past its prime, but it's so comfortable. It's molded to your body. It fits you exactly the way you want it to fit because you've had it for years. But maybe it has holes in it. Maybe it's frayed around the edges. Maybe it's not something you can wear outside because it's just too broken down. It's like that. I feel like we put these habits on every morning as if this is something we just have to be. This is who we are. When in fact, it's comfortable, but it's not necessarily permanent. You know, it's comfortable, and then you start to believe that means it's just who you are, even though the comfort level is just telling you you've been doing this a very long time. You know, we all have those patterns that we know. Oh, I'm thinking that, oh, yep, that's what I do. And getting people to recognize that, you know, step back a little bit and observe what you're doing so that you can recognize the patterns. Some are very helpful, some are not, you know, and finding out which ones really aren't serving you anymore.
Yeah. And equally, that comes back to the way you think as well. I mean, we've got patterns of how we think and how we talk to ourselves. And I mean, as an example, it's something that one of my friends picked up, and only when she said it to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I never knew I did that. I was always saying to myself, if something went wrong or if I did something silly, I was like, oh my goodness, Henriette, you're so stupid. Why would you do that? And I used to say it to myself, but even sometimes out loud. And one of my friends said, why would you say that to yourself? And I was like, I don't know. It's just a habit. I just say it. But what I didn't realize is I was actually really training my brain to say that I'm stupid. I can't do certain things and I'm clumsy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we don't recognize that we're doing that for ourselves.
Yeah. The power of self-talk. Oof, boy, we could do a whole nother talk on just that.
We should do that.
It's one of the, let's make a note. One of the first things I ask people to do when they start working with me is to try to jot down little notes during the day when they notice their self-talk. Because you say to people, what do you say to yourself? And sometimes people will say, I don't know. I don't think I say anything to myself. And then a week later they come back and they've got a notebook full. They go, guess what I say to myself all the time. It's really remarkable. And of course words have meaning, and they create, you know, this space in us. You know, Henriette is stupid. It creates this groove in your brain where eventually you believe it as fact. You stop really thinking it and you just believe it. That's the real damage of long-seated habits that are destructive, that maybe came from, to us from some other unhappy situation or that sort of thing, is that you stop really thinking. You just ingest it as belief, as truth. If I think Henriette is stupid, then she is. It becomes a fact. And that's when we have to peel that back and say, really? Why? Why is that a fact? Tell me how that became so true for you. It's fascinating work, what we say to ourselves and how it becomes so ingrained in our belief system.
Yeah. And that's the thing. As soon as I realized that and it was brought to light, I was like, now I'm vigilant. Now I'm listening out for it. So when I do that, I'm going, whoa, stop myself. And this is where I felt like, hey, it's never too late to change. I've got to change this. But equally, there is the fear aspect behind it. And this is something else we want to talk about, because you've got to manage that fear, manage the fear of change equally. What would you say to people? How can they manage that fear? Because let's face it, whenever there's change, whether it's in a habit, whether it's in your physical environment, personally, there's always fear involved, or fear there's part of fear in that, and that kind of stops you as well from moving forward.
Yeah. And, I talk to people about fear when we work together, because people feel it and it manifests in them in all unique ways. So the way in which fear resonates within me is different than you. So it's in therapy, it's really important that I understand, and then together we get to understand, how is it that fear lives within you, and then what does it do? Because a lot of times fear can be very physical. I feel my fear physically. It's a physiological response I start to feel when I'm really terrified. And when you were talking about how fear could hold you back or managing it, I was thinking about the day I went into my college to defend my thesis. So that's kind of the last step. You've written your thesis, you've finished all of your academic work, all your years of clinical work, all your years of, for me, with counseling psychology, you had to go through personal therapy. So you finished all of that, years and years and years of a lot of work. You've written this thing that, you don't even know at this point, what is it? And then you had to go in and defend it. And so the last step of realizing this dream that I think I had, honestly, from grade school. And all of that collided in that moment. I was sitting outside the room waiting to be called in. And I felt like my body had left. I felt like I had left my body and I was floating above myself. And I was looking out the window, and there was, my university was in a park, beautiful park. And I'm looking out at the rose bushes that I could see outside the window, and there was a gentle breeze. And I honestly didn't feel like first of all, I didn't remember a damn thing about my thesis, so I was never going to be able to defend it. That was going through my head. But also just that real sense of just losing myself. I was terrified. I just didn't, and there was that, and then just that little thought that says, you can leave. You don't have to stay. Get out of here. Fight or flight was definitely in play. I just stayed, I just stayed. I stayed in the fear. I sat in my chair. And I remember the woman walking out of the room, like slow motion, coming toward me. And I just thinking, get it together, Bonnie, get it together. You have to stand up now. And just like really telling myself to step into the fear. So I talk to people a lot about that. Like, my way is not your way. Everyone has their own response. But fear, for some people, means stop and don't do it. And what I try to tell people is understanding that the fear rises up to defend you, to help you, to keep you from hurting yourself or whatever. But because these habits are so well worn in us, when we go to try to change, the fear is brought up as like, don't do that. That's too hard. It's okay. Just stay the way you are. And you have to step into the fear. You have to step into the fear. How do you do it? Do you take a deep breath? Do you, get somebody to help you? Do you talk about it in therapy? Do you challenge yourself? Do you watch your negative self-talk? Yes, 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 all of it. Um, it's about recognizing that the fear is coming up to warn you that you're about to change. And I think thinking about it as that, as a positive instead of a, stop, get away from this. It's just about trying to understand that the fear is there to help you, but you still can manage it. You can still step into it, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. And as you're saying it, I love the fact that you're verbalizing it, because I went through a stage where fear was, oh my gosh, I was always anxious. I went through a place where I was really anxious all the time when it came to business, growing, all of those things. And fear kept on stepping in all the time. And then I read this book and they said, you've got to acknowledge the fear. But here's the thing. We get brought up with the idea that fear is a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. All it is your body compass telling you you're out of alignment. That, something is not in alignment with you. What is it? Acknowledge it, and then move over it and get back into the alignment. Yeah. And I love your way of explaining it as well, because it isn't something that you need to move away from. It is something you need to acknowledge. And then, like you said, change is about to happen. So it's a good thing. Fear is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But you need to recognize it. You need to recognize it and go, okay, for me personally, what I tell myself is, okay, why am I anxious? Why am I worried? Why am I scared about this? Something is out of alignment. What is it? What is the change that is about to happen that I need to accept and go for it? So I love the fact that you're saying that, because you just, like I said, light bulb moment for me, where I just like, well, that's it. That's exactly how I experience it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, everything that's happening in our body when we're feeling fear that intensely is helping us to either, fight the wildebeest that is chasing us through the land, or, run. And so everything is happening physiologically that's saying, we're going to fight this or we're going to run. And because that's so intense, all the other parts of our brain, it says, it's okay, be creative, you've got this, the confidence, all that stuff is kind of pushed to the side, because the brain says, we've got to survive here. Oh my God, we're about to die. That's the way the brain is, that's the message coming to you. So it's very, very intense. But what we can do nowadays is look around and go, okay, I'm sitting in a perfectly lovely office. I'm waiting to defend my thesis. No one's going to eat me. I'm not going to die. The worst thing that's going to happen is that, I don't pass, but that's, I'm okay. I'm prepared. I know what I'm doing. Just that bringing down your nervous system to say, I actually don't need to fight or flee. I'm going to stay right here and I'm just going to engage. You've got to talk yourself down from that.
Yeah. And I have to say, thankfully, I've never been chased by a wildebeest before, but if I do, I can tell you, I'd definitely be down running. But it's so true, because at the end of the day, it's very much, again, what we said before, how do you talk to yourself? That conversation you have with yourself when you're in that fierce position, when you're anxious, when you're worried, when you're scared. What is the conversation you're having with yourself in order to get you to go like, I can do this, I can move forward. This is where the change is about to happen. So it all comes, beautifully together. So acknowledging the fact that you got to talk to yourself in the right sense. Otherwise, it'll just spiral out of control.
Exactly.
The other thing I find sometimes when I talk to people is that, oh my gosh, and I have to say this, I've spoken to a lot of clients. And one of the things that always pop up is they say that I'm so scared to ask for help, because if I ask for help, it might look as though I'm not strong enough or I'm not capable to do things on my own. And what have you found as well when it comes to people saying to you that they're scared of asking for help, or they didn't know if they should ask for help?
Yeah, that is a big one. I think that's, besides the stigma of mental health and the way in which people in the past, I think it's gotten much better now, but it's the idea that, something's wrong with you. hopefully that message is changing now, and we're getting more to the root of, just trying to help people understand and understand what happened to you, and therefore, you know, how you've developed the way you are and how to change that. But the help comes in. It's so interesting to me. It's there are certain things I think in everybody's life where you would ask for help. It's like I wouldn't try to do the electricity in my house. I wouldn't try to fix the plumbing. I would get someone in who was an expert. There's something about our mind and asking for help around you know our perceived sense of weaknesses that I think people really get hung up on in ways that they don't in other aspects of their lives. So I'm not 100% sure anymore, because I'm obviously so steeped in my work. I work with people all the time, and I've done my own work, and I know 100% asking for help is the sign of strength. Asking for help says, I know that there are things I want to work on, that I want to understand better about myself, and I don't know how to get from A to Z. I see it, but I don't know how to get down that road. Makes sense. I did years of training. Hopefully there's, some benefit to all of that work that gives me a certain expertise to try to help you go down that road. It's about you understanding yourself better. But because there's all these other things that we've been talking about, the fear, it gets in the way. So sometimes it's hard for you to see it yourself. When I work with people, they'll say something and I'll say, did you hear what you just said? And they're like, no, I don't even know what I just said. And my job is to mirror back to them. Well, you just said you thought it was hopeless, or you just said you think you're stupid, or you just said, and people are always surprised. There's something about that mirroring back what I hear, and therefore trying to understand, that gives them a further insight into themselves. It's the reflection back. I don't think everybody always knows what goes on in therapy, and that's kind of my mission. Is I don't want it to be a mystery. I want it to be very open and very honest, and that you understand what goes on. And it's really that at the root of it is asking for help in trying to get to your own understanding of yourself. And I just think, who wouldn't want that? Why wouldn't you want to understand yourself better?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why we do all of these tests that you get online, where people talk about discover what kind of personality you are, just take this kind of quiz. And the other one that I always recommend to my clients is the strength finder test. It's like, go and find out what your strengths are. If you kind of have a vague idea or you don't even know, go and do this test. So of course, we all get very curious as to, how am I? Who am I? How am I thinking? What goes on inside? So honestly, I think everybody should go and see you. Everybody should go and get a better insight of what goes on in here, and what are the root causes of certain things, why you're doing certain things, why you're not doing certain things, what are the things that are holding you back. And this is the best part, because once you know what they are and you understand yourself better, oh my gosh, you can move forward. You have basically a roadmap as to then go like, oh, this is one of those things, let me get over it and just move on. But up until the point you don't really know what that is, it's so hard.
It's hard for all of us. It's hard to understand that, because it's covered over with, your brain just wants to help you stay in balance. It just wants to help you. So it will do things that will kind of try to, help you. And, and I'm reading a lot about sort of the effect of the pandemic in this year, and previous pandemics, and how people feel when they come out of them. And so there's a lot of things where the environment affects our sense of self, affects our own sense of safety, or our own sense of value. And life happens to us. People die, loved ones die, pets die. These illnesses, or watching people be sick, it all alters us. It all changes the way in which you see the world. So it's a lot of layers to get through, and there's a lot to understand. So just get a guide. That's what I feel like I am. I'm just a guide. Yeah. Because I don't tell you how to change. You know, I don't tell you what to do. I think that's the biggest misunderstanding is people think that, oh, I'm going to go get advice from a stranger. That's what I've heard people call therapy. And they're sorely disappointed with me because I don't think I've ever given advice ever. You know yourself so much better than I know you. I'm just trying to help you see it, you know? So yeah, I think asking for help, I'm a big proponent of it
Yeah,
for
yeah.
myself and for others. Yeah.
I actually had something really beautiful a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to share it here because I think individually for each of us as human beings, we love to help other people, but it's so hard for us to ask for help. So, you know, as a business owner and as a profession, whatever you're doing, you're always happy and willing to give people advice and to help them and to guide them and just be there and support them. But it is very hard yourself to then go and ask for somebody to help you. So this is something that I heard, and I'm going to try and remember how to say this correctly, but it goes something like this, that if you are not going out there and asking for the help that you deserve, you're denying somebody else the opportunity to help you. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so powerful. So if I don't go out there and ask for help, I'm denying somebody else the opportunity to actually step up and say, I can help you. Give me this opportunity to help you. So when I heard that, I was like, I'm not scared of asking for help. Now I want to give somebody else the opportunity to you know, go out there and serve and help.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because you ask people, I think it was, I'm going to screw this up. I'm not going to quote it exactly because I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was Brene Brown I saw recently, who I just love because her whole perspective about vulnerability and the strength in being vulnerable, which I completely agree with. But she said something about, you know, talk to yourself like you would talk to somebody you were in love with or that you loved. And I think that is the key is you can be so kind and so giving to others. But think about your own self-talk. Think about giving yourself the gift of asking for help. Think about giving yourself the chance to grow and understand yourself better. Why wouldn't you? You know, why wouldn't you? You would do it for someone else in a heartbeat. And so I think that's the real way to try to get people to understand when they step away from that and say, no, I'm fine. You know, I'm afraid to ask for help, or I don't want it. I'm afraid what it would look like. But they don't feel that way about other people, you know, and it seems to be a really good way to get people to kind of think about it.
Yeah. And I think what you say is very true because people say, you know, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to go down there. I don't want to change because I don't know what it would look like. But this is the thing. This is where you can become really curious and just be open-minded to it. And I think curiosity is one of those big things that if you're really curious about something, and let's face it, I'm really curious to learn more about what goes on in my own head sometimes. But if you're really curious about something, you go out there and you go and search for the answers, right? So equally, when it comes to just being curious about discovering more about yourself, what your habits are, what are those blocks that are stopping you, you know, just ask for help and go out there. But from your point of view, what would you say about people who are saying, yeah, you know, maybe I want to change something, but I don't know if, am I curious enough? Should I be open-minded to it? What would you say?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of those coping strategies maybe a lot of us use to kind of close down the fear, or to we're feeling a little too anxious about the possibility of change because we don't know who we're going to be. We don't know what that's going to look like. Or like for me, the long-held dream was about to become a reality. And I think that was probably the most scared I was ever, because what did that mean? You know, if I don't have that dream anymore. So I just feel like stepping into it in a way that says, I'm not 100% sure how this is going to go, but I have this passion, this love, this desire, for me, a vocation to want to do this work. So I'm curious about what that is then going to look like, and I'm open to how the experience is going to go. I think I spent my whole academic career curious. I was that annoying older student that sat in the front row and had one more question, and everybody else is hoping to get out early. You know, I was that one. They're like, well, if no one has any other questions, we'll adjourn. And I'm like, oh, I have one more question. And you hear the collective groan behind you because everybody's like, no, we were going to get out early. But the curiosity, yeah. And what I think is beautiful about curiosity is if you're curious, it takes it away from being so personal or so powerful in a way. You can just say, well, I'm just curious. I'm just open. I'm just going to see how this goes. You're not committing necessarily that it's going to go a certain way or that it has to go a certain way. I'm just going to show up and I'm going to be open and I'm going to be curious about how this works. And maybe I don't understand it, but maybe it will help me in the end. Maybe I will understand it at some point, because it's the rigidity. We talked about this. When someone comes in and says, I'm just this way and that's the way it is, that's my personality. That's if I was like, if I went in different colors when people said things, I would go bright red, all kinds of alarm bells, because that's the rigidity, the opposite of being curious, the opposite of being open, that says, oh, this is just who I am, can't change. And we just know it's not true. We absolutely know from research now. And it's so exciting, it's so exciting to think that through my self-observation and my work on myself, that the possibilities are endless. I don't have to think this is just the way it is. I'm just stuck in this job, or I'm just stuck in this relationship, or I'm just stuck in this city that I hate. It's just everything is possible if you allow yourself to be open and curious about it. Things just change. They just start to change.
They do. And as you're saying that, I just had this memory of when I started my business. I was very curious about what it would be like, because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur since the age of 13. But I, was really comfortable. I had an amazing job and I loved it, and I loved the people I worked with, and life was great. But then something in the back of my head, just like, you remember this idea you had of becoming an entrepreneur and having your own business? And I was like, okay, now I'm curious. Why did this pop up out of the blue all of a sudden? And then I started exploring it out of curiosity. And like you would do, you go on Google, how to start an online business. And then you obviously go down a whole rabbit hole and you feel like you can never dig yourself out again. But that curiosity kind of led me to start my business and run it 2 years while working full-time. So I ran it along the sideline, and that was tough, honestly. That was a tough thing to do. But the curiosity kept me going, because I wanted to see, is this something that I can get passionate about? How is this change going to affect me? And all the fears kept coming back up. So everything we just spoken about here, that whole change, it was a hard thing. And I think the biggest decision I made was over Christmas, when I said to my husband one day, I was like, that's it. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go full time into my business. That's it. So I'm going to be like, no salary, just my business. And I'm going to make this work. And my husband was fully supportive, and I did it. And oh my gosh, a new fear started. Now I had to manage the new fear because I didn't have a salary coming in. I was struggling to get clients, but it just kept on going. But I am so glad I did it, because you know what? Back to what we said in the beginning, that growth, that fear kept telling me there's going to be a change. There's going to be a good change. Just get back into it. But I think one of the biggest aspects of that was curiosity. I wanted to see and I wanted to prove to myself that I can do this.
Yeah. And what you just said there was that it was 2 years of doing it with your full-time business. And even before the 2 years was preparation, I'm sure, of things that you then had to put in place. And then what you did during the 2 years, still working another job. Yeah. And then the quit of, the other job and the step into your business. But this is years of you mentally preparing, of you doing the background work, of you doing the research, of you doing the steps that it took for you to eventually quit your day job and to be sitting right here in front of me right now. This is what people don't realize, is that it's the curiosity and the openness, but it's steps. It doesn't happen overnight. Nothing does. And when you get overwhelmed that you're thinking about a change, well, just say that change is not all going to happen today. Today, I'm going to do a phone call. I'm going to talk to someone on a podcast. I'm going to do some marketing work with my assistant. Today, this is what I'm going to do. And mental health, it's the same thing. You know, today I'm going to manage my self-talk. I'm going to listen to what I'm saying to myself. And I'm going to talk about it in therapy on Friday. And then I'm going to journal some about it. And then next Friday, I'm going to talk some more about it. I'm going to notice that there's been a tiny little shift because I noticed it. Now it's starting to alter a little bit. But it's steps, you know, it's not all one thing. It's not all overnight.
Yeah.
I had a classmate who, on our last day of academics, the 3 years of academics, he brought in this assignment sheet that showed every single assignment that we had completed over the 3 years. It was just pages and pages of presentations and papers and, you know, all these reading assignments, and then the group work we had done, pages and pages over 3 years. And he goes, what do you think you would have done if somebody would have shown this to you on day one and said, this is what you're going to do? I've no doubt what I would have done. I would have been terrified. I was already terrified. But the thought of all that work, I can't do it, would have been the first thing that would have jumped in my mind. But I did it. But I didn't do it in one day. I did it in 3 years, you know? So that's the other thing, really remembering that you did all this prep work, you did all this research, you did it step by step, and the change happened because you did the work, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And that's why it's so powerful, you know? If you want to change something, if you want to change your life, if you want to change career, relationship, doesn't matter what it is, what the change is that you want to change, get curious and open-minded about it, and know that it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think that also takes that, gives you that little sense of relief as well, of like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. It is going to take time. But saying that, with the days we're living in today, technology, everything happens, you know, the snap of your fingers. People want things to happen a lot quicker because that's what we use. Again, that's a habit. We're so used to having things happening quicker for us that we want everything else in life to be quickly, you know, to have a quick turnaround. But unfortunately, life has got its own system. It's got its own, what is the word? Routine, you know, it's just a flow. You can't speed it up and you can't slow it down.
And, you know, I'm 58 years old. I have 58 years where of developing thoughts and habits and ways of being and the way in which I see things. And so if today I say I start the journey on changing something, an unhelpful thought that I've noticed has really been plaguing me, well, today I start that, but noticing that it's a pretty well-worn habit by now. And so it's going to take some time. It's not going to be overnight. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and be done with that. And that's actually a good thing, I think, because it gives us the air and the space to recognize how the change starts to happen. And it gives us some time to adjust, you know. It's not, doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's a positive that it doesn't happen overnight. You know, I think it gives us all time to adjust to the change, you know.
Yeah, otherwise it would be one heck of a shock if it happens overnight. Then you can't cope with it again.
Right. No, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, Bonnie, I just love this conversation. I just think everybody goes, and hopefully everybody's listened to this and made so many notes. And what I would like to say that if you are curious, if you want to change something really, really badly in your life, but you're not quite sure what it's going to look like, or you're even scared of change, you want to discover a little bit more about what maybe stops you from moving forward, if you need to change or if you want to change something, then my suggestion is just get in contact with Bonnie. You know, she might be able to help you, and I'm sure she's very willing to chat with you and to see how she can help you out. But Bonnie, before we get to everything, there's something I want to talk about here, which I think is such a huge achievement. And that is that you've recently written a chapter in a book. And I know you were so excited about this because this is something that was completely new to you and you really enjoyed the whole process. Tell me a little bit about that, and tell me a little bit about the book.
Yeah, it's a bit like, it still feels a little surreal to me, because I think in addition to always wanting to be a psychologist, I also love reading and writing. It's always been just the number one sort of enjoyable thing that I always did, but the writing was always for me, private journals, private diaries, years and years. And so I was approached to write a chapter for this book. And I'm looking because it's right here, hold it up. And so when I was approached, Pegeen, who is the woman it's her brainchild to put it together. She wanted women to write chapters on leadership, and it's called Called to Lead: Success Strategies for Women. And so I went through a process, like we're talking about change. My first reaction, I'm not a leader. I'm just a psychologist that works one-on-one with people in my own little quiet part of the world, and my little group of clients. Who am I leading? That was my first reaction. And then I noticed that reaction and I thought, isn't that interesting? What would I say to my best friend if she said that to me, right? Practicing my own advice. And I realized that I had to write this chapter. Not only should I, but I had to, because clearly this is some faulty thinking going on inside my head, because we were all leaders. We were all leaders within whatever we're doing. And especially, I think, entrepreneurs, the way that we step into what we do and our belief, I believe we are all leaders in some ways. So I got to write the chapter, had to battle lots of, you're not good enough. Who the hell do you think you are for writing a chapter? You're not an author. This is going to be terrible. Everybody else's chapters are going to be so much better than yours, blah, blah, blah. There it went, right? So I had to battle that. I had the fear. I had all of the fight or flight. In fact, I'm kind of feeling it right now just talking about it. But I did it anyway. I stepped into it. And it was a fascinating process. And it was amazing. I can't imagine that if I wouldn't have done it. I can't imagine if I would have stepped back and said, no, I'm not a leader, or no, I don't know that it would be good enough, or I don't have anything to say, which were all my first impulses, all of my first thoughts. So yeah, it's been fantastic. And the other chapters in this book are also inspirational, a wide array and a variety of women from all over the world, all over different jobs, different careers, but all sort of in that focus of what does it mean to us about being called to lead. And I'm really, really proud of it. And I'm so happy about it. And it's just sparked that little writing bug now. So who knows, being curious about that, where that might take me.
Maybe you're going to start your own book very soon.
Maybe.
No, I think that is a huge achievement. And I remember when you spoke about it the first time, here's the thing. There's so many of you in the audience listening to this now going, yeah, I want to write a book. Yeah, I want to go and do and achieve this. And yeah, maybe I want to go back to school and get my doctorate or get my diploma or degree or whatever it is. But, is it too late? Yes, I'm curious about it, but should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? And I mean, Bonnie's story is just beautiful. It just explains it. She had all of those fears, those little voices going off saying, really, do you really think you can do this? Or do you really want to do this? And you might have the same process, which I know some of you do. But just take the tips which Bonnie shared here with you today and just go for it. That fear, it is telling you that there's change is about to happen. Whether you then go and say, nope, not for me, or you acknowledge it and then just go for it anyway. You never know where it could take you. And here Bonnie is. She took that step and, was it a #1 bestseller, or how did that turn out?
I'm sure it must be somewhere.
But it's still on the app because it was just recently came out as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. It is, and it's available through Amazon, either the paperback itself, or you can do the ebook, depending on what your preference is. Yeah.
Amazing. So what we're going to do for those of you who wants to read that chapter that Bonnie wrote in the book and also get some ideas of the other stories in that book, we're going to put the link for the book in the show notes. So you're more than welcome to go and get that. And to be honest with you, I think it's a great book to have. I still got to get my copy because I made a note of all the books. There's so many books that I still need to get, but that is one of the books on my little post-it that I want to get myself. And I would just highly recommend it because I know you and I know that you have so much to offer, and knowing that you've been approached you know, by beginning for this, I think it's just phenomenal. So go and get your copy.
Yeah.
Don't let fear stop you. Just do it.
It's exactly it. It's exactly it. And you know, we all listen to things and people say, trust me, if I could do it, you could do it. You know, people say that all the time. But I'm telling you, trust me, if I stepped into my fear, because my fear is as personal and real to me as your fear is to you. And if I could step into it, you can, because there's nothing magic about me. You know, it's not like I'm this special human being that has some magical powers when it comes to dealing with her fear. I feel it just as real as everyone else. So it's just that kind of lesson of step into it, be curious, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. I think we've just given everybody a roadmap here today of what they need to do. So if that still stops you and you're still feeling not quite sure, then, you know, we're going to put Bonnie's contact details in the show notes so you can go and make contact with her. Like she said, she does all the work online, so it doesn't matter where you're on the world, she might be able to help you with that. But Bonnie, I just wanted to say it has been absolute pleasure having you here, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And I just love this conversation. Maybe we should, you know, arrange another podcast soon and we can talk about all of those other things that we spoke about last time.
Henriette, it's always great with you. I don't know what this is, but there's just some sort of connection. It's just easy and we could talk forever. So,
I know.
and I feel like you really bring out the clarity in things. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, because sometimes it's a lot to say and you really helped boil it down in very clear points. So
No, it was
a ton of fun.
brilliant. Thank you so much. And yeah, we're going to be in contact very soon again. But thank you for your time here with us today. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll speak soon.